together with the Q&A. So I hope all of you agree, and unfortunately those of you who don't agree with the recording will not be able to remain in the meeting. So I'm waiting now, Diana, for the beep that says the recording has started. And we assume
yes, the recording. Yeah, it has started.
It has started. Thank you. There was no beep, so which it's fun. So, as you know, we, as one of our means to implement the grant bargain commitments, DG ECHO has been piloting programmatic partnerships. So, with different partners and in different phases. And let me just seize this opportunity to thank very much all our pilot programmatic partners with whom we have been working over the last 3 years, and who have really contributed a lot to the mutual lesson learning, which has then fed into the design of the rollout phase of the programmatic partnership. As you know, all our efforts have been really driven by the overarching aim that we want to get a maximum of aid directly to the beneficiaries. And for the programmatic partnerships, while they are providing very concrete targeted assistance to the most vulnerable in need, they are different from our regular way of working insofar as they have a very strong strategic component, which means that mutually with the partners, we support initiatives or approaches that we do believe are important for the delivery of humanitarian aid and for the humanitarian aid system. So based on the pilot phase, the 3 different pilot phases that we have been doing, as of 2023, we will be mainstreaming programmatic partnerships, which means they will become one of the modalities that we as DG ECHO have available of working with our partners. Anik will present in a moment the characteristics of the rollout of the programmatic partnerships and its mainstreaming, and then of course we have a lot of time for your questions on the rollout. So with that, over to you, Anik.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, and welcome to all of you that I see on the big screen. A lot of participants, very happy to see you all there. And I have around the table with me also other colleagues that I will quickly introduce. We have Charles Pirot, we have Gabriela Filipova, and we have Margarita from E1, who will also help us, I suppose, answer some of your questions, as there might be some more legal and contractual aspects in your questions further on. Then on my left, I have Diana, who's helping us with all the logistic, and Marlu Tok, who is also supporting us with the programmatic partnership rollout phase and this presentation. So quickly, Suzanne has already introduced some of the elements that I was actually planning to share with you, so I will try not to repeat it, to set the scene with a few slides explaining the key drivers for DG ECHO to pilot and now mainstream the programmatic partnership model. Then I will take you through the guidance for the rollout phase, which I believe you will all have seen. It's been uploaded on the partners website. I will try to keep the presentation as short as possible to leave as much time for questions. So on the key drivers for the programmatic partnership model, Suzanne said it, we started piloting the model in response to the Grand Bargain and the expectation to generate efficiency and effectiveness gains. The idea being that through more predictability and flexibility, partners would make some economies of scale, allowing them to reach out to more beneficiaries. In the current context of limited increase in funds available to tackle increased humanitarian needs, you will all agree that this central objective of the Grand Bargain is more than ever relevant. To be noted that the programmatic partnerships are only one way to respond to Grand Bargain commitments. There are others in which DG ECHO is also engaged. For instance, when it comes to less earmarking, we started supporting country-based pool funds. Or when we speak about multi-year funding, we have been encouraging 24-month contracts, in particular in education in emergency and disaster preparedness projects since some years now. An important aspect of the Grand Bargain quid pro quo that I would like to mention here from an institutional donor's point of view is the increased EU visibility expected in exchange of these programmatic partnerships. We are accountable to EU taxpayers and to beneficiaries, hence the importance to demonstrate what the EU budget is actually achieving. A second important, a second important driver to piloting programmatic partnerships was to bring our partnerships to another level by promoting longer-term strategies of common interest, scaling up innovative approaches and collecting evidence, which requires sometimes a longer time span. Some of these strategies of common interests are, for instance, and they are of course not exhaustive, the promotion of cash, liaising with development instruments whenever a nexus approach can be envisaged, increasing EU support to local responders, quite crucial for us too, promoting environmental solutions to humanitarian aid, piloting anticipatory actions, etc. In the context of the pilot programmatic partnership, in order to achieve this enhanced partnership, we encouraged increased dialogue. What does it mean? As you know, one of the specificities of the EU as a donor is its extensive field network of technical assistance and experts. So building trust starts in the field through more frequent exchanges on policies, needs analysis, and other relevant information with a view to ensure a constant alignment of our respective response strategies. And the quality of the dialogue is also to be seen at the headquarters level, which is also important. It can take different forms. Can be technical meetings on a specific topic of common interest, could be high-level dialogues, co-chairing of advisory groups also, or side events in margin of main conferences, etc. So just to quickly recap what we have been doing so far, and Susan mentioned it, the different pilot programmatic partnerships which have been launched since 2020, 8 of them so far. 4 with NGO and 4 with UN agencies and other international organizations. We should launch a last pilot still this year with a UN body. And this would be the last pilot programmatic partnership before the rollout phase kicks in. So most of these pilot programmatic partnerships are multi-country and they are spanning over 3 years. Some of the lessons learned from these pilots are on the positive side, the possibility to have a single agreement covering many countries with opportunities of cross-fertilization and exchange of good practice. The longer-term perspective, allowing partners to implement strategies requiring more time, we already said it, and generating economies of scale. The overall outcome-driven log frame, which allows more flexibility to adapt the program to new unexpected needs. The simplified reporting too, one interim report instead of many in case of multi-country PPs, and for some pilot programmatic partnerships, the piloting of the 8+3 model. And another positive element I already mentioned is this enhanced dialogue, both at field and headquarters level. On the negative side, because we do have also some negative lessons, which we actually considered when thinking about the rollout phase. It's the selection process, which was considered too heavy and disconnected from the normal HIP selection process. Also the complex communication channels with different levels of engagement, the lack of ownership by the field, both from DG ECHO side and from partner side, as the process was seen as very much top-down. And then there was also the lack of clear guidance from the start, which a lot of partners mentioned as a negative side of this piloting exercise. So going to the rollout phase, so based on all these lessons learned, it was decided to limit the scope of the future programmatic partnerships to geographic HIP. So this concretely means that the geographic HIPs and their technical annexes are the documents which will inform you about the sectors or types of interventions which could benefit from a mutual strategic perspective, multi-annual strategic perspective. You will see this in section 5 of the HIP, once they are published, which is the section on envisaged DG ECHO response. And there is another reference to multi-annual planning, which you will be able to find in the HIP-DA, so the technical annex of the HIP, in section 3.E. By mainstreaming the programmatic model in geographic HIP, we ensure a better alignment of potential future PPs with DG ECHO strategies. We avoid parallel selection process with different timelines. We simplify the communication channels. The communication will be now between the partners and the geo unit only, with corresponding exchanges, of course, at field level, as for any kind of project. As for Unit D1, we will continue following the ongoing pilot programmatic partnerships, drawing lessons from these, including from the more recent ones. And there is in particular one that is purely thematic, non-geographically earmarked. It will be interesting to follow. And we will support the geographic colleagues throughout the analysis selection process of the future PP under the HIP 2023. Okay, so, sorry. Next one. Yeah. So the future programmatic partnerships are usually expected to be multi-country, although country PPs, country-based PPs are not excluded. As you know, we have single country HIP. And even under multi-country HIP, this could be envisaged if well justified. If multi-country or regional, though, the programmatic partnership should fall under one geographic HIP. Unless specified otherwise, or in agreement with the geo unit, which means that this could be discussed with a specific geo unit, which has, for instance, different HIP, and there could be a good rationale, maybe, to go across this different HIP. But this is not the, let's say, most standard and preferred option. The programmatic partnership being mainstreamed in the geographic HIPs will need to be, of course, in line with the multi-annual strategies which will be spelled out in each relevant HIP. This means that not all HIP actually might consider such a longer-term perspective as relevant. So you will need to read the different HIPs once they are published to understand it, if this is relevant or not. This very much depends on DG ECHO's own analysis of the best response to a certain crisis, and of course also of the initial budget available. The duration of a programmatic partnership is expected to be of a minimum of 24 months and of a maximum of 48 months. On the funding now, funding of a programmatic partnership can be awarded in year one for the total duration of the programmatic partnership. This is what we call multi-year funding, as per the definition agreed by participants to the caucus on quality funding. And when this is feasible, it is indeed the preferred option. However, multi-year funding is not a goal per se, and should serve to allow partners to generate additional efficiency and effectiveness gains. And to this end, you might have seen that a non-exhaustive list of relevant assessment criteria has been agreed upon during the caucus on quality funding, which you could refer to when asking for multi-year funding. Now, there will be cases where multi-year funding will not be possible. For instance, when the initial envelope available under a HIP is insufficient. In this case, the programmatic partnership funding can be awarded in stages. That's what we call staged approach, through successive commitments of minimum 12 months. Under the staged approach, a letter of intent is sent to partners informing about DG ECHO's understanding with respect to the overall multi-annual operation. This means that the indicative amounts needed for the successive stages of the program are referred to in this letter. On the scope and duration now, the future programmatic partnership, it was already done. So where is the application? Yeah, application process. Good. Application process. So a proposal for PPs should be submitted in APEL under the relevant HIP using the standard single form with appropriate annexes. And in case of multi-country programmatic partnerships, Chapter 2 of the single form should be filled in per country. The indicative date for submission of the proposals is provided in the relevant HIPTA as usual, and the programmatic partnership submission date will be the same as for all other projects. Now, in case of multiple submission dates within a multi-country HIP, which happens quite often, the programmatic partnership submission date will normally be the earliest. If multi-year funding is requested, the single form should cover the whole duration of the program, including in terms of outcome targets to be achieved and budget. However, in order to allow DG ECHO to monitor the implementation, partners would be asked to attach an annex of sort of a work plan per year with yearly milestones. There is no specific template for this annex, so it is left to each partner to decide how they want to present it. Now, if multi-year funding is not feasible, or if it is not requested, the staged approach would apply, and in this case, the single form would cover only the initial stage, which means the initial duration, for instance, 12 months of the program. The targets at the end of the initial stage would need to be mentioned, and only the targets at the end of the initial stage, and the budget covering, again, this initial stage. However, in an annex, we would ask the partner to explain its multi-annual strategy, its multi-annual vision, including the expected gains and outcomes at the very end of this program. In case a partner submits a request for multi-year funded programmatic partnership and is being told that it can only be funded through the staged approach for the reason that I mentioned, for instance, not sufficient initial funding of the HIP, the single form would then need to be revised in order to comply with the rule I just mentioned. On the selection now, DG ECHO geographic units, you will have understood it, will analyze and select the programmatic partnerships alongside any other non-PP proposals. There is no specific budget allocated to future programmatic partnerships. So the criteria for selection are very much the same for a programmatic partnership as the non-PP projects, including, for instance, the quality of the proposal and the capacity of partners. In addition, programmatic partnerships should focus on geographic and strategic priorities of shared interest as they are actually proposed in each HIP, so including the opportunities for multi-annual programming, which you will read in the different HIPs. It should aim at achieving greater outcomes at the end of the program than if the partner had embarked in successive but distinct annual projects. So we're talking effectiveness gains here. And it should demonstrate the benefits of their proposed multi-annual strategy in terms of efficiency gain. And this is particularly relevant when requesting multi-year funding. And partners are invited in their proposals to present really clear arguments and quantification to that effect in the submission, meaning the quantification of the efficiency gains that they are expected to reach through multi-year funding. Localization, I already mentioned it, is something that is very important for DG ECHO. It's one of these commitments stemming from the Grand Bargain that we are very much promoting. There will be actually a guidance on localization. It's in preparation at the moment in DG ECHO. And in the context of the programmatic partnership, it is therefore crucial that the advantages granted to an international partner by DG ECHO be in terms of flexibility or predictability. In particular, in case of multi-year funding, it's very important that these advantages trickle down to your implementing partners at the local level. Now, a slide addressing flexibility, because I know that many of you are wondering about the type of flexibility that might be provided in the rollout phase for programmatic partnerships. So first, the programmatic partnership is outcome driven. So this means that there should be more flexibility in the means activated to reach these outcomes, with more possibility to switching funds among activities and budgetary lines. And as of 2023, DG ECHO will also consider the possibility to allow partners to move funds from one country to another in case of multi-country programs, including but not exclusively in the context of programmatic partnership. A third example of flexibility is the so-called crisis modifier we probably all know about. It's a feature which has been in place for some years now. This crisis modifier usually translates into a specific result, which can be triggered in case of a new onset crisis or disaster, with no need for the partner to request a modification of the program. These crisis modifiers can, of course, also be included in programmatic partnerships. And finally, in case of a programmatic partnership funded in stages, we allow funds unused in year 1 to be carried over in year 2, provided, of course, this underspending is reasonable and well justified and implementation is on track. On visibility, as mentioned at the beginning, an important aspect of the Grand Bargain quid pro quo for us is the increased EU visibility. So a partner applying for a programmatic partnership would therefore be expected to provide a detailed communication and visibility plan, fully in line with our mandatory standard requirements. including on-site branding, media and social media outreach, etc. I believe that the guidance includes the link to the relevant instructions for ease of reference. So you can click on the link and you will be able to see all these instructions in case you have never seen them before, which I doubt. Hopefully you all are aware of these requirements. Now, on top of this, we strongly encourage partners to consider above standard visibility plans with campaigning initiatives targeting EU audiences. The plan would identify key messages, concrete and creative communication deliverables, and suggest a measurable dissemination strategy. Above standard visibility plans should, in case you wish to submit one, be developed also in close coordination with DG ECHO and would be considered an asset in evaluating the programmatic partnership proposals. We're coming to the end of this presentation, so just a reminder about who are the eligible partners for the rollout phase of the Programmatic Partnership 2023. They are the UN agencies and bodies, ICRC and IFRC, the EU member state specialized agencies, and the international NGO partners holding a Programmatic Partnership certificate. Consortia are encouraged. However, a consortium of NGO partners can apply for programmatic partnership only if the consortium entirely consists of partners holding this programmatic partnership certificate. And on the timeline now, this is the last slide, looking at the expected timeline for 2023. The publication of the HIP and HIPTA, including initial funding amounts, is planned as usual, I believe, for November this year. And no information on countries or sectors identified in the HIP and HIPTA for potential PP will be available before the publication of these strategic documents, just in case you're wondering. And following the publication, as per the usual practice, ECHO country offices will organize information sessions and present their HIP in the field. Any question relating to a specific HIP can be asked at that moment or channeled through the relevant geographic unit. For the rest, the submission of proposals is expected within the deadlines set up in each HIPTA as usual. Feedback on proposals can be expected soon after, as per the normal practice. And the signature of the agreements will of course depend on the date of submission on the one hand, and on the need or not for a revised version on the other hand, as it's usually the case for non-PP projects, so nothing different there. So I believe that I have come to the end of my presentation, so we will have now a session of question and answers, but in case, and as you know, Suzanne mentioned it, the whole presentation and Q&A session is recorded, so any partner who would like to, who's not present, who would like to listen to this presentation is more welcome. It will be put on the partner's website, but in case you have any additional question of a general nature afterwards, we have afterthoughts, you can send them to Marlou, please, before the 28th of October, so that this would allow us to post an updated question and answers on the website beginning of November, so well ahead of the publication of the HIP and HIPTA. Over to you, Suzanne, and thank you to all of you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anik, for a very comprehensive presentation outlining the key elements of the programmatic partnership mainstreaming, but also of the process. And maybe we can put up the slide with Marlu's email address, so in case colleagues have questions of a general nature, so that we can include them in the Q&A that will be published. Because as you know, as we have done so far with the piloting, we also want to make sure that we have a fully transparent approach with the rollout phase, so that we will put all relevant information on the website. With that, we have promised you a relatively short presentation so that we have got sufficient time for your questions and answers. So the floor is now yours. Please feel free to ask any questions of clarifications that you would like to ask. And when you take the floor, I would just ask you to state your name and the organization where you're coming from, and if you like, also switch on your camera. So with that, over to you. I see one hand is up. I'm just say maybe we can take one or two or three, 4 questions at the same time. Great. So let me just take the questions as they are coming up. So we have got 4 colleagues who have asked for the floor. Jean-Yves, IRC, Mariko, Niels, and Joseline. So could I ask you to come in that order and ask your question, and then we will reply to these questions. Jean-Yves, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this extensive presentation. And 2 questions, if I may. So first, it was mentioned that no information on which country is concerned by the PP would be available before the publication of the HIP technical annex. We usually, let's say, look at this type of initiative from a global point of view, and having in mind all the countries that we work with. The HIP technical annex are usually published, let's say, through, let's say, mid-November, mid-December, 1 month or a little bit more. And it's going to be a little bit complicated for us to, in some way, wait for the last HIP technical annex to be published before to have the final list of all the countries which are concerned. So would it be possible, if not before, that when the first HIP technical annex is published, you would publish the list of all the countries that would be PP eligible? That would help us immensely for the planning. And another aspect that could also assist us for the planning is to have the list of the 35, if I'm correct, currently ECO PP certified partner. I know that the list of all the partners is online, but I don't think that the list of the certified partners is online. And if there is no issue with GDPR, that would also be useful to have such a list. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy, for those questions. I hand over to Mariko.
Yeah, thank you very much, Susanne and colleagues. No, this initiative is very much welcomed, and it's really great to learn that it's now going to be mainstreamed into the HIP. So I have 3 practical questions, one a bit of a different type of a question. Hopefully it's not too complicated. One is since this is mainstreamed into the HIP process, so our usual practice is that we submit a proposal multi-donor basis. So do we consider that this also the same approach will be applied, the multi-donor nature, or it's going to be more, you're looking at more on the single donor nature? So that's one practical question. Another one is on the reporting. As per the Grand Bargain, this 8+3 is mentioned. Then it would be good to have a clarity if you already know. The proposal is going to submit it through the e-single form. Then the following reporting, internal report, final report, is also we submit through the e-single form, the same format, or it's going to be additional reporting on top of the e-single form reporting. So that's the second question. And the third one is because this is going to be mainstreamed in the HIP process and the submission deadline, everything aligned to the HIP. So suppose we want to submit a proposal, we're aiming to get this programmatic partnership, the multi-year, but at the same time, I mean, we also consider the single year. Does that mean that we submit 2 proposals, or we opt for submitting one, and then based on the the screening process, we'll be advised either to go continue with the multi-year or the single year, so that we understand better that we have to think about submitting already two, or we can really opt for one, but without losing the opportunity of having the single year HIP option. Then the last question is, maybe it might be too early, but it would be good to hear from you what's the indicative scale or size scope of this programmatic partnership. For instance, like, I don't know, 10% of the overall HIP, or 10% like by number of contracts, or the indicative amount by percentage. If you have any rough figure of 2023 implementation and onwards, if you're thinking of incrementally increasing, or if you think of any targets that, okay, overall 30% of the funding to be the multi-year. So those are the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariko. Then I hand over to Niels and then to Rosaline, and then we close this session. And the next ones in the next round will then be, of course, already Carolina and Ines who have their hand up. So first, back to Niels for your question.
I think I can't put my camera. So hello everyone, I'm Niels from Oxfam. Thanks a lot for organizing this session and the opportunity to ask questions. I had a clarification one regarding the status of non-programmatic partnership certified partners by ECHO. And so I understand very well that consortiums can only be informed of programmatic partners, but can you, in the guidance, it also says that non-programmatic partners, but that are still certified by ECHO, can't be introduced as implementing partners either. Could you confirm around that? I'm particularly asking this from the perspective of a family organization like Oxfam, where we do introduce, because of our registration in countries, other members of the confederation to which these registration in countries pertain, and sometimes these are ECHO certified partners, but not programmatic partners. Thanks for answering that.
Thanks, Niels. And then the last question for this round, over to you, Rosaline.
Thank you, Suzanne. I'm Rosaline from Concern Worldwide. A bit of a repeat of questions, but just we're looking for the list of the 35 PP certified partners if possible. Also, I think a repeat, but is it okay to apply for both the PP and the kind of regular program within every country, or was there a preference to kind of do one or the other? And then lastly, just to kind of be clear, is it for every single country there'd be a PP, and also for every single region? Can we kind of prepare on that basis? Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks a lot, colleagues, for all your questions. With that, I hand over to Annick, Charles, and the colleagues in the room.
Yeah. Okay, so I will try and start answering a maximum of these questions, and then I will hand over also to Charles and colleagues from E1. Would it be possible to have the list of all countries? Well, if it wouldn't make much sense. In the fact it's not programmatic partnership, and you will see it when you read the HIP and the HIPTA, it's just not about saying in this or that country. It could also be linked to sectors, and the sectors could be in any of the countries of a certain HIP. So I'm afraid this is not just saying in which countries you might have a programmatic partnership. You will, I'm afraid, have to wait until the publication of all the HIP and the HIPTA in order to understand where it is appropriate possibly to submit a programmatic partnership, bearing in mind, of course, that, as I mentioned, a programmatic partnership should fall under one single HIP. So there might not be a need for having a global overview if we, and I repeat it, we will not have global programmatic partnerships in 2023. We will not have thematic programmatic partnership. We will have programmatic partnerships encompassing one single HIP. The certified list of programmatic partners, I'm turning to Jean to understand if it's not confidential and if we can actually, we can give it. Okay. Yeah, all right. So then.
Just for all colleagues' information, one of the requirements under the certificate is that the certificate needs to be made publicly available on the partner's website. So by definition, if this is done by the partners themselves, acting upon the requirements set out in the certificate itself, I do not see why then this information cannot be reflected in a, let's say, summarized manner on the list of partners which DG ECO publishes.
Okay, so we will do that on the partner's website then, correct?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Mariko, multi-donor approach is still multi-donor approach. It's not because we are moving to a programmatic partnership that we suddenly change our way of working with, in particular in that what we call indirect management partners. So it's up to you to decide if the programmatic partnership you want to propose actually is something that can be co-funded, co-financed by other donors, and in which case, of course, it would fall under a multi-donor approach. We already have one pilot programmatic partnership ongoing, the one with UNICEF, with which obviously we are not the only donor to the outcome expected from this programmatic partnership. So 8+3, it will be through the e-single form. There are a couple of partners, I believe, or 3 of them, pilot programmatic partners who are actually already testing the 8+3. The reporting is through the single form, but there are some sections of the single form that are made, how do we say that, that are optional because they are not falling under the 8+3 template. And actually, when it comes to 8+3 in DG ECO, it's 8+2. There are only 2 additional questions that have been selected. Alors, there are there were different questions about should we submit a programmatic partnership or a project. Well, it's not the same. You will see in the HIP and in the HIPTA that the strategies are different. You will be informed about the intervention, the type of interventions or the sectors, sometimes also specified in which crisis context. It's considered by DG ECO more appropriate to have a multi-annual vision, a multi-annual strategy. And that's where you will be able to focus with a programmatic partnership. In other areas, I would not recommend you to try with a programmatic partnership because it would obviously not be the thinking behind ECO strategies for 2023. And there, for the other sectors that are mentioned as normal sectors, of course, you are more than welcome to also submit a normal project proposal. You are not limited to what you want to submit. And I can reassure you that during the analysis of the proposals, the geographic colleagues will very much look also at the opportunities for maybe some of the proposals to potentially be upgraded to a programmatic partnership, because it might be that a partner has not realized the potential for a certain proposal, which is for 1 year, and the other way around, when there is a very good proposal, but which does not really look like a strategic proposal, that would better fit a normal project. There can be also discussions for downgrading, if you want, your proposal and suggesting that it could be a simple project. So why are you laughing, Charles?
Well, downgrading may not be the best appropriate terminology, but let's say
transformed into a yearly project. Okay. The scale and size of the programmatic partnership, as I mentioned, there is no budget, specific budget earmarked for programmatic partnership. There is no specific target either. So it will all depend on the quality of the proposals we will receive. So no, there is no obligation, I would say, to go for a certain target, but we are definitely looking indeed at going more in the direction of programmatic partnerships, and even more so inside the programmatic partnership, also looking at multi-year funding approaches as as you know, our commission has committed to indeed support an increase in multi-year funding. Now, Niels' question on the over to you, Charles.
Yes, indeed, we can confirm that those NGOs which would have been certified by ECHO but would not have so far Programmatic Partnership certificate could not act even as an IP in the context of PPC, Programmatic Partnership Consortium.
Okay, so I think we have come to the end of all these questions, Susanne. So we can go for a second.
Yeah, let me just check with the colleagues who asked the questions, whether I can see nodding or silence, meaning agreement that your questions have been answered. Okay, then let's go to the next round. We'll actually split it in two rounds because I see now more hands are going up. So let's in that next round include Carolina, Ines, and Raf. That's a bit the order in which the hands went up. So first, over to you, Carolina.
Thank you. I'm Carolina Goransson from Save the Children. Thanks for the presentation and for opening up for this type of partnership. It's exciting and something that other institutional donors are also looking into at an increasing level. And that's actually my first question in terms of the setup and the guidance for this programmatic partnership. How has it been coordinated together with other donors to have similar approaches to this type of flexibility in funding? And I have another question as well. For the pilot PPs that's been running, both the NGO ones and the UN ones and others, are there any lessons learned, papers or studies published, or that could be indeed shared more widely to see examples of successful PPs and also, of course, seeing the challenges and how they were tackled and considered? So yes, those are my two questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Carolina. Over to Ines and your question.
Hello everybody. I'm Ines from PY. I have two questions also. First, I see in the document in the guidance that one of the objectives of the PP is to build a local actors capacity. So I was wondering if we could have local partners as IPs under those projects. And my second question is regarding the multi-year funding of the stage approach. So if I understood correctly, it's up to us. We decide when we submit the project according to the strategy of the project, if we want to request a multi-year funding or a stage approach. But multi-year funding may be rejected if you have some budget limitation on the IP. And I was wondering, would it be possible in the IP to have indication on whether you would prefer a multi-year funding or a stage approach? To avoid, for example, some extra workload if we ask for a multi-year funding and it's not possible on your side. If you already know that, maybe you can give indication in the IP. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ines. And at the end of this round of questions, over to Raf.
Well, first of all, thank you for the useful presentation. Two questions. You mentioned in the beginning that you would like to see focus on certain priorities, for example, localization, greening. Would that be your preferred option, or are the normal sectoral responses that we wouldn't call it routinely, but that we would normally do also be considered, or is there a preference to look at those priority areas like localization and greening or other thematic themes? And secondly, the economy of scale and the cost efficiencies that are expected were mentioned, and also the increase of the number of beneficiaries. How exactly did you see this? Because, I mean, if you do multi-year, by definition, you will have higher number of beneficiaries, but is it expected that you will have exponentially more because you do multi-year? UNHCR being a UN agency, we also always work with multi-donor actions. So there, this exponential increase of beneficiaries might be a little bit difficult. So I would like to hear how you would see that practically. Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Raf, for the questions from UNHCR side. So now back to Annick and Charles.
Yeah. Thank you. Caroline, did we coordinate with other donors when we started piloting the programmatic partnership approach? Not really, but we did discuss with them in the sense that even before starting piloting programmatic partnerships, we had an exchange with some of our EU member states who are implementing different ways of working, like a program-based approach of SIDA, to name just one. Then we've recently had, as you are aware, a session with some of these EU member states and the pilot NGO partners, who were piloting the PP with us, in a session exchanging experiences and to see how we were progressing. I believe that there is actually the idea of having a document produced after this session that will actually collect the different best practice or good examples of success stories. And this would certainly be something available to all to be published. So far as all our pilot programmatic partnerships are still ongoing, we have not yet finished even one. Even those with the NGOs will only come to an end next year. So when it comes to really looking at the end of the program outcomes, we will only be able to draw the lessons on this next year with the NGOs. So we don't have any studies published. I have mentioned during the presentation some of the lessons learned, which were the first lessons learned mainly from the NGO pilot programmatic partnership, because the other ones have started later. And so we will continue, and this is our role also in particular in Unit D1, we'll continue to follow these pilot programmatic partnerships, these different types of PPs, because they are quite varied and different, and to learn the lessons, and we will certainly keep you all abreast of the lessons learned from these. Local actors can certainly be implementing partners, as is already the case now. Charles, yeah, you know,
yes,
it's all fine. Yes. And it's of course encouraged, for sure. Staged approach, can we have an indication in the HIP if multi-year funding is preferred? I don't think you will find it in the HIP and the HIPTA, to tell you the truth. Now, as I mentioned, after the publication of the HIP and the HIPTA, there will be presentations at field level. Geographic colleagues will participate. I believe that there you can also reach out to them and ask them concretely what is feasible within the initial envelope that would be under a certain HIP, because it's so specific to each HIP, to each geographic unit, to see what they have in mind. It's better to discuss this with the relevant geographic units, I would say, but I really don't think you will have an indication on the preferred funding modality in the HIP and HIPTA, at least so far from the drafts that I have personally seen. Apart from education in emergency disaster preparedness, as I had mentioned in the presentation, 24 months. For the rest, I think it's going to be difficult to find. Suzanne, do you have any particular note? I see you noting. Okay. So, Raf, focus on priorities. Well, actually, you mentioned greening, you mentioned localization. Those are actually cross-cutting important strategic aspects that we would like to see supported in any kind of project, and programmatic partnership is also, of course, very relevant to have. But when it comes, these are cross-cutting. So when it comes to looking into the different HIP, that's where you will see the different sectors being mentioned. For instance, you might have nutrition in one particular crisis setting, or you might have cash as a preferred option, or you might have shelters or forced displacement in another one. So greening is always good in any kind of project, and also for programmatic partnership. Localization as well, of course, as we said, is to be promoted wherever it's feasible and appropriate. To calculate the efficiency gain, I do agree with you that this might be sometimes considered as difficult, but we don't have a specific methodology to offer you. So it depends on the different partners' ways of seeing things through the gains in terms of economies of scales and other potential administrative burden reduction or whatever, how they can express it in a way that explains quantitatively to us why going for a 2 or 3 or possibly 4 years programming will make a difference that will then trigger down to the final beneficiaries in terms of the quality of the outcomes, but also maybe also in terms of the quantity of the beneficiaries, which will be more thanks to this longer term strategy and more predictability of funding. I don't know if anybody else wants to intervene on that one. No? Okay. So I think that's it. That's it, Suzanne, for this.
Thanks, Annick. I'm just giving the colleagues who asked the question a moment to check whether all their questions have been replied to. Great, thanks a lot. So now I have got 2 hands up in the order, Chiara and Anne-Marie, and at one point in time, Nicola and Martina had their hands up, but I don't see them up any longer. So, and I see Nicola waving. So, okay. So over to Chiara and Anne-Marie for the next round of questions. Chiara, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Chiara Menducci from FAO. I think one of my questions was already asked and answered, so I'll be faster. I just wanted to ask a couple of clarifications. I think in one of the last slides, you were mentioning the consortia. There's been already a question related to that. I was just wondering if there will be encouraged joint proposals from at least UN partners. I'm just thinking, for example, based on our experience with FAO and the Programmatic Partnership on Anticipatory Reaction, on the need for coherence also among different partners working on one subject in a given country or other countries. So I was wondering if that would have been encouraged, or it's something that once again is aligned with geodesks or geographical colleagues at country level, ECHO colleagues, I mean, to decide and then discuss with them. And then, Annick, you mentioned something at the very beginning about the PPP falling under one HIP. Maybe I misunderstood, but I was wondering if the proposals are multi-country, how they would fall under one single HIP, if HIPs can be also single country, not necessarily multi-country, but maybe I misunderstood the explanation. Thank you.
Thanks, Chiara. Over to Anne-Marie.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Anne-Marie McCarthy. I work at the Danish Refugee Council. My question is on, it's related to the possibility of including a research agenda. So I know in the pilots there was like a learning agenda as part of the submission. So if we were to look at potentially something in a multi-country context with a view to having a learning question, would that be qualified partnership?
I don't know whether other colleagues also had a bit of a difficulty with hearing what Anne-Marie said, but I think we, Annick, you got the question on the gist of the question, which was on the incorporation of a learning or research component in the PPs for the mainstreaming phase. I'm just checking very quickly whether a new hand has gone up. This is not the case, so back to Annick and Charles.
Okay. All right, so on the consortium, very much encouraged, I would say, UN joint proposals, definitely. But once again, it will depend of what you will read in the different HIP and HIPTA, and how you will be able to come forth with a joint proposal to respond to these multi-annual strategies. But yes, of course, very much consortium, it's in all cases, including, of course, in the cases of UN, for sure.
And if I may add in retrospect, even though this may not be limited to the UN family, but it may actually be overall easier to explain and substantiate the effectiveness and efficiency gains expected from a PP proposals when you have the UN acting as one, or when you have various NGOs present in a given country acting together. So this element needs also to be borne in mind, and this may be a welcome incentive indeed for better coordination in country or in countries, including to start with at the needs assessment phase.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe indeed I wasn't clear enough when it comes to having a programmatic partnership falling under one HIP. So what I said is that in case we have a HIP which is only covering one country, of course there can be a programmatic partnership in one country only. So it would be targeting only one country, the one of that HIP. In many cases, we have multi-country HIPs, as you know. West and Central Africa, I think, is covering 8 of them, and then you have Great Lakes. Now we have they will make it even bigger. So usually it's covering many countries of one region. And so in that case, the programmatic partnership could be multi-country. It can also be focusing on one specific country. But again, in terms of efficiency gain, etc., you might have it might be easier to justify it if you go multi-country, but it should be under one HIP. It should not be across different HIPs, because for the pilot programmatic partnership phase, we are experiencing different models, and we are indeed experiencing also this model of having a programmatic partnership covering different countries across 7 different HIPs, for instance. This is not the preferred model for 2023 rollout, except if you in your discussion with the geographic unit concerned, you propose something that might be going across 2 or 3 different HIPs falling under that particular geographic unit, then of course we're never going to go against it. But it is not the preferred option. The preferred option for the rollout phase 2023 is within one HIP. You remain within one HIP. It can be one country or multi-country. Learning, yeah. Suzanne, I don't know if you want to answer that question from Anne-Marie, because we were a little bit disconnected. I think it's about having a learning element in a programmatic partnership with evidence gathering, etc. This is, of course, very much encouraged, because it's often the element that is strategic in a programmatic partnership, that you are testing or you are scaling up an innovative approach, and then you want to learn from this, and you need more time to gather evidence. So the longer time span of a programmatic partnership is often welcome for this kind of testing of learning. So, Suzanne, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, maybe just to double check with Anne-Marie, because I think we all had problems understanding completely because of a connection issue, but just double checking with Anne-Marie, and then of course also Chiara, whether the replies answer your question.
Sorry, I apologize for my dodgy internet, but yes, you understood my question, and the answer is understandable. Very much, thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Let's just see whether there are any further questions. For the time being, I see a hand up, but I will, of course, give colleagues another moment in case somebody else has another question. Okay, so we have got 2 more questions, one from Chiara, the other one from Ilse. So, Chiara, please go.
Hello, sorry. Thanks very much for giving me the chance to ask this question and for the presentation and very, very useful exchange. I'm Chiara from NRC, and I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more on the flexibility aspects that you highlighted, specifically on the outcome-driven point, on ability and possibility to use budgets more flexibly. How does that compare to the flexibility that already ECHO grants, and what additional benefits are there to get from this approach? And if you could also share a bit more information on the shifting budgets between countries, because that would be very interesting. Technically, how it would happen? Would it be a modification request? Would it be, how would that happen in practice? Thank you.
Thank you for the question from Chiara from NRC. I hand over to Ilse.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the wonderful exchange of questions and answers. I think as one of the pilot organizations, we have really seen also the wonderful benefits that we have from exchanging more closely with you on different topics and having this lessons learned session. I was just wondering if this is also that is envisaged through the rollout next year to have this kind of engagement. And also, I think you already indicated about the reporting, how it would look, but would there be maybe any other additional requirements, reporting, or some kind of things that we should need to consider also now that we are planning to apply? Thank you.
Great, very, very good questions, Ilse. And then I see Ines, do you want to come in again?
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I want to steal Dana's question on the chat because I think it's very interesting. The question is an organization limited to one PP, or can we submit many projects under different IPs? Or should we limit ourselves on the number of PP projects we submit?
Okay. Okay, sorry, I think I have a bit of a connection problem on my side. So in order to avoid further connection trouble, I hand over to Annick and Jan.
Thank you, Suzanne. So I'll go through this new set of questions, then we'll see if there are others. Chiara, on the flexibility provided, thanks to an outcome-driven or logical framework, well, the fact is that if you are not bound by specific output indicators in a log frame, and you are more looking towards what are the outcomes, including with milestone. I mentioned the importance to also have regular annual check on milestones, etc. But outcome driven, then you give the partners the flexibility to decide the type of activities that they want to put in place in order to achieve these outcomes, and there is a flexibility to move around these different activities without any specific need to first come back to us and then ask for a modification request. Even in the case of when we have a multi-country programmatic partnership, and sometimes even within a specific country where we are targeting a certain area, a certain geographic area, we can also show some flexibility about moving the operation to other areas of that country if the crisis is moving, and we can actually just recognize or mention these changes later on when there is an opportunity for a modification request. So there are this kind of flexibilities that are not given in a 1 year project, which does not allow, just because also of the length of the program, to allow for this kind of quick changes. now, about the shifting the budget between the countries when it comes to a multi-country programmatic partnerships, this is new. It's not only for programmatic partnership, it's for any kind of multi-country or regional program as well. But it depends, of course, the decision is with the geographic units to decide if this is opportune or not. It would require a modification request. And of course, there would be also internally, there is a set of rules, but it's internal on how we should actually get the approval of these changes by our senior management, etc. Because as you know, there is a decision, a yearly decision on how much is being allocated or put aside for a particular country. So I don't know, Charles, if you have any further information on these flexibility elements, which talking a bit about 10% up to 20%?
No. Actually, I wanted to possibly complement what you said on, but more on the negative side, i.e., why it has proved to be and would still be more difficult to implement programmatic partnerships over different HIPs, because for technical reasons, I will spare you today, it would be even more difficult to reallocate financial envelopes earmarked for specific countries between HIPs than within the same HIP. One of the reasons, there are others, but one of the reasons which underpins the choice for the rollout of this year to work on a HIP basis, even though the HIP can cover a region or at least several countries, is precisely because there is also greater flexibility, subject to, of course, decisions to be made by management from a strictly operational viewpoint about how the monies can be shifted from one subcompartment to the other. But beyond this, indeed, as soon as the amounts concerned would be significant, beyond 5 to 10%, then of course the scrutiny, I guess, would most likely be higher, also on the part of DG ECO management, because indeed this may have, this would have a greater impact on the initial vision of DG ECO and the Commission itself, because let's not forget that ECO implements what the Commission authorizes to implement about how the EU humanitarian budget should be allocated among different crises. So there are always ways and means to flexibilize this, but it's not free for all blank check given to ECO afterwards.
And there would be a modification request afterwards anyway, once it's approved.
I guess it would. I do not know where would I do not know technically where would the allocation per country in the PP be identified, so that we may have to see this further. Actually, this is the type of question which colleagues from the Contract and Finance Unit, ECO E3, Jan Samples Unit, and colleagues would possibly master better than I would, but to be seen.
Yeah, this is new, so we will all have to learn in the progress of next year how it works. But it's answering one of the main asks from pilot programmatic partners to have this flexibility to move funds from one country to another. So hopefully this will be helpful in the future. Lessons learned on the rollout, Suzanne, I don't know actually if there will be lessons learned from the rollout. There will certainly be lessons learned from the ongoing pilot programmatic partnerships.
Yeah,
your connection.
But I think on this one, and it links a little bit to the reply to the previous question. I mean, as the piloting has been a mutual learning exercise, also
bad,
for
Suzanne,
the rollout phase, of course, especially for 2023.
Sorry, the connection is really bad.
Also be. Oh, let me
come again.
Okay, I will. Okay, I have switched off my camera, so maybe that. You hear now?
No, I think it's pretty bad. So we'll come back to this question once we have a clearer answer. Reporting requirements, Ilse, they are the same they are the same as for normal projects, in the sense that there will be an interim report requested every, I think it's once per period of 12 months. If you are using the 8+3, as I mentioned, the reporting through the single form will also have some sections which might become optional, and which are for the time being absolutely requested. So, but depending on this 8+3. Apart from that, then the final report, of course, at the end of the program. So depending if it's a 2 years program, at the end of the 2 year, or 3 years if it's 3 years, you can submit as many programmatic partnerships as you wish. As many projects as you want. There is no limitation. I'm just advising you to carefully read the HIP again and the HIPTA in order to really focus your submission of programmatic partnerships, where you will see that there is a clear indication by geographic colleagues that this is opportune, in order not losing time in submissions that are not really planned in the HIP. If you are not in line with the HIP strategies, it's not going to fly. So, yeah.
And maybe Anik on this one, I hope you can hear me now, because I see from the chat that online my connection is fine. No, also just on picking up on Dana's question, really the importance that you underlined already in the beginning, that there is a big difference between a regular program and the programmatic partnership. So the programmatic partnership really has to have a very strong strategic component, a new initiative, a new policy, new standards that we believe through the programmatic partnership we can help promote and roll out further, while at the same time really providing the emergency assistance to the people most in need. So that is a bit also, I think, something I think very important to actually factor in when you decide whether to apply with what you propose, whether that fits more into the regular project approach, or whether that would really lend itself to a program approach. And I keep my camera off just to make sure that the audio goes through.
And then we have a last question on the chat that I'm seeing on the 8+3. It is optional. It is not mandatory, unless Charles, you
No. I mean, it's the option will be offered to all PP partners, but if they absolutely do not want it, we will not insist.
Yeah. And it will be for interim report and final report stage. So throughout. Yep. Any other questions? Suzanne, you still with us?
Yeah, we have another question coming up from a colleague. Carlos, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for this session. I'm Carlos from ACF Spain. I just want to ensure that I have a clear picture on that. So my first question would be, can a single project be multi-year? That would be the first question. And then when should we consider going for a stage approach instead of going for the total duration? And my last question, I know that an Oxfam colleague already asked it, but not sure if it was clear for me. So what will be the case in case of family organizations, and if they can be included as implementing partners in a programmatic partnership? Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos. Let's just see whether there is another question before I hand over back to Anik and Charles. No, that doesn't seem to be the case. So over to you.
So, Carlos, yeah, of course, a non-PP project, what you call a single project, I suppose, is a non-PP project. A non-PP project can be multi-year funded, if that's what you mean. We already have the case for the regular education in emergency and disaster preparedness projects. They have to be 24 months. And they have to be multi-year funded, so funded upfront for 2 years. So this is the type, if it's what you mean by single project, of course.
Yes, it is.
Right? Yeah, okay. I have not understood your second question, but your third one will be for Charles. So could you just repeat your second question, Charles?
Yeah, sure. So it's in the case we have to decide if it's better to go for a stage approach instead of going for a total duration application of a programmatic partnership.
Is it your call, you mean?
No, how should they, which factors should they take into account for making that decision? I can start if you want.
Oh, yeah.
Even though, as Annick mentioned on several occasions, to the best of my knowledge and our knowledge, there has been no decision, possibly for the simple reason that it may not be possible to make such a decision at this stage as to the level of funding that would be dedicated by ECHO to programmatic partnerships, or for that matter, multi-year funding. It is clear that the use of multi-year funding is even more demanding, so to speak, from a budgetary management viewpoint, since, as you know, multi-year funding implies that the multi-year action will be budgetary covered in one go, at the time of the signing of the agreement. So, in effect, if you would consider, I mean, if you remember what was mentioned in one of the slides, a PP can range from 24 to 48 months. Again, speaking, let's say, in a personal capacity, but I guess that I would not be too far away from what will happen in practice. If you would request a 36 or 48 month, or if you would consider a 36 to 48 month duration for your PP, unless, of course, the amounts are really reasonable, it, on balance, would most likely be more difficult for ECHO to go for multi-year funding than if it would be for a 24-month action. So that's a bit of a rule of thumb. That's nothing scientific, just, let's say, I would say common sense. Bearing in mind that one of the interests of this PP approach, in particular, if one would take into account the strategic element, the foreseeability, predictability, being outcome driven, I would assume that it may be even more interesting, so to speak, where possible, to submit a PP proposals with a longer duration, i.e. either 36 or even 48 compared to 24 months, which is the minimum, the ceiling. You should also bear that into account in terms of the funding. As mentioned by Annick as well, you can have a combination. You can request, let's say, to take, again, what most likely in real life terms may be what will happen on most occasions, even though, again, there is no hard and fast rule or decision on this. But again, being realistic, you can possibly expect a 24-month multi-year funding to start your programmatic partnership. But then if you would like to also continue this PP over a third and a fourth year, then this would most likely, again, to be checked against reality, would then be covered by the stage approach and the letter of intent. But that's my only 2 cents personal views on this. It's, as I said, based rather on common sense. And to answer your last question, so within a family, if you would have local, or if you would have some members of your family outside of the European Union, they can be IPs, since by definition they cannot be certified as a certified NGO partner of ECHO. But as far as members of your family that would be EU-based, if those members have been certified, they may not be IPs of a UOPP project. I hope this clarifies.
Okay, thanks, Charles and Annick. We have got time for a last round of questions. In terms of hands up, I see Martina has her hand up, so I will give the floor to her in a moment. I see there is also a question from Jean-Yves in the chat, and the question from Jean-Yves is whether we can confirm that the letter of intent will include the amount for every year. And then just waiting for one more moment if there's any other question before we close this final round of questions, and I hand over to Annick and Charles to reply to your questions. So last call for any inquiries you might have in the session today, being also aware, of course, that you can still send your questions of a general nature to us by the 28th of October. So there is a question, also, the last question that's coming in also from the chat. I don't know, Annick and Charles, whether you see it. It's from Inga. Can you confirm if multi-year funding for non-PP certified partners will be available across all sectors or just education in emergencies and disaster preparedness? So with these three last questions, over to you.
Okay, three, I only have two. Okay, maybe. Let's see. So first, confirmation that the letter of intent will include the amounts of every years of the PP. Yes, as was the case for the pilot programmatic partnerships, which started in 2021, as a matter of fact. And can you confirm multi-year funding? The multi-year funding, as I mentioned, under the programmatic partnership might not be mentioned, but in the HIPTA, you will find a reference to multi-year funding. Don't remember in which article, and it refers normally to, for sure, education in emergency and disaster preparedness, and it's for each geographic unit to decide if they want to add a specific sector. So that's where you would be able to identify if there are other sectors outside of the programmatic partnership, which is recommended for 24 months or more, but usually it's 24-month approach by the GEO colleagues. So, I don't have a third question. Do you have one? No.
The third question is actually from Martina, who will make her question live. So over to you, Martina.
Thank you very much. This is Martina from People in Need. I was curious about the contractual aspects of the programmatic partnership. Will the MGA somehow differ from the one that we have seen before, as the programmatic partnership offers different options? Where will this be summarized, these new rules, please? Thank you.
Nope. They are the same rules. Model grant agreements applies to programmatic partnership with NGOs.
So to complement this, the contractual template will be the same. The main differences will be actually reflected in the operational part of the package, i.e. the single form. The log frame would, in principle, look differently, outcome driven, longer duration. There may also be these additional annexes, also describing activities on a yearly basis. But in terms of contractual template, to the best of my knowledge, the same MGA template would apply, including, as far as consortia are concerned, the possibility of being co-partners and co-signing for various NGO partners, one and the same MGA.
Okay.
Then Martina, we have a last.
Pierre-Yves, does that reply to your questions? Yeah. Okay. Good. So I don't see any more hand up because Martina still has her hand up from the previous question, I think.
And we have a last question on the chat, Suzanne.
Okay. So, Charles, we will read it for you. Can you confirm if non-local and non-EU based family members can be included as IPs?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that was a short reply and a clear one. Thank you, Charles. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Let me just double check whether I see any more hands up. I don't see any more hands up. So I would really like to thank you very, very much for all the partners who have joined us for this information session today. I really hope it has been a useful complement to the guidance that has been published. As Annick said in the beginning, we are going to publish the presentation on the website, and we will also publish an updated Q&A. So once again, our warm invitation to you, if you have got any other questions of a more general nature that you were not able to ask in this session today, please send them to Marlou by the 28th of October, and you have got Marlou's email in the chat, because with that we will then update the Q&A document if necessary, and then upload it, of course, on the website so that all our potential partners have the same level of information. And of course, I would like to thank very much Annick and Marlou for organizing this meeting, and of course Charles and the other DG ECHO colleagues who have been joining this session and who have been helping to reply to the questions. With that, I wish you very successful applications to the HIPS 2023, be they programmatic partnerships or regular proposals. And I hope to see you on a future occasion. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks.
you.